Hey everybody, I'm Nico.
And I'm TK.
And welcome back to an all new, all different X's for Comics. It's been a really crazy time. We set out a couple of months ago with a goal in mind. We said we've been floating nebulously, and we've been doing Marvel and DC. And so first, how have you enjoyed your first year of DC? As like not that you've never read DC before. You're not like
No,
just born.
all my first year of DC. I have of course read other DC stuff, but I have never regularly bought DC books. I have never read at minimum one DC book a week for a year at all. Nothing even close to it. I bought stuff like Seven Soldiers. There were times where there were other events where you could maybe even say 6 months, but I have never regularly bought DC books. I've never regularly bought DC books such that I was reading old books to catch up on current continuity the way I have always done with Marvel, the way that I can, now I read everything Marvel. Before I met you, I had read Daredevil. I'd read plenty of Daredevil, but I hadn't really read Daredevil. But I'm so used to reading Marvel that when we started reading Daredevil for the show, it was super easy for me to just go read old Daredevil issues. I needed no context. I was never confused. If I didn't know somebody, I knew how to connect to them through other Marvel stuff. Completely different story with DC. This wasn't entirely my first year. And it was a fantastic first year. Really, really interesting to have the experience because you can only do it twice. They're Image, Dark Horse, Boom, Dynamite, to name some of Top Cow, to name some of the bigger names who are not the big two, all fantastic publishers of comics, and that's not counting so many different indies or even a company like Valiant. Even still, nothing compares to the enormous universe that the big two have, and you can only enter them really once. You either commit to doing that or you don't. And I did the first one when I was 6 years old. And so it had been 33 years since I had made the attempt to fully absorb and start understanding a universe. And there was only one other one to do it with.
And, when you say there's only one other one to do it with, it's so funny to me because I think about one of my favorite universes ever is Incorruptibles, the Mark Waid verse for Irredeemable, and there's even a third title, but it's not the same. It doesn't really tie in, and they're talking about doing more. They've said that Irredeemable is coming back, for which I'm really grateful. And 100 Bullets is coming back, and that's not even Vertigo. That's its own universe. But you're right. It's illusion of choice. Really, it's illusion of choice because even then you're still working with it's either the DC version and they have a Marvel ape of it, or there's the Marvel version and they have the DC ape of it. But no matter what, you're going to get some, this is the Sentry. He is the copy of Superman. You know what I mean? You get those things. So you're really right. It really is the illusion of choice in this instance.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, that doesn't mean that those are the only comic companies, but and as you mentioned, there are some very prolific, expansive stories. Again, Valiant is another one that comes to mind. There's a lot of books. There's just not that many compared to how many DC and Marvel books there are. And there's, a lot of the companies, again, when you look at something like Irredeemable, that was published much later and just was published in a different style. The fact that you might get a Morrison or a Hickman who is going to pull out the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh reference, which it was a decades old, very campy reference at the time and was not ever meant to be taken seriously. And Morrison did what Morrison always does, which is, beautifully retcon and reinterpret and update. He is, they are the king of that sort of soft reboot retcon style that I think so many people ape, especially when they try and do, soft reboots now where the continuity is maintained from the old show, but the old show, which was a 90s show, which was not edgy at all, now has to have a new 2025 edge to it. Morrison always, had succeeded in doing that so many times by pulling stupid concepts from Golden Age comics and being like, here's why this is actually the darkest fucking thing you've ever heard in your life. But those references require knowledge to get the full effect. If you knew nothing about Batman, the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh thing was not lost on you because everything still matters, but there's another huge layer to it when you understand that it's a concept that comes from very, very old, very silly Batman comics.
People say to me like, oh, that guy's 23, he's so hot. I'm like, I'm sure he is, but I don't think he's for me, because no matter how beautiful he is, he's not gonna have the references that drive my heart. Like, yeah, I'm not drawn to that, even though I can aesthetically appreciate it and it connects with me. That's how I feel a lot about some of these comic runs and writers. They have the right pieces, but they're lacking that depth of experience that elevates something from beautiful to complex and beautiful.
And I think, again, I point to Morrison because we've been talking about him so much lately, but he is really that good. And again, I use this Batman reference because you could be a new reader and not know that, and the story in the run is still really good. But these companies own this stuff. They made it. They bought it. They paid somebody to make it. You might as well use it. That's the thing. I understand this idea of like disenfranchisement and feeling like, and again, I'm talking about it in terms of I came to DC not having read so much of it, not having this depth of background knowledge. It was a little bit intimidating. It's okay to be a little scared sometimes, guys. It's okay to be intimidated. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. Like, there's this idea that like we have to always be comfortable and entertained in our fiction. You miss out on so much by not being willing to be somewhat challenged in any capacity. And one of the ways you miss out is you'll never read this Morrison run because it's going to be so big, but also then you'll never go back and read the old stuff and never learn the history. And on the flip side of things, companies will publish a lot less because they'll say, oh, we want to make it so accessible to new readers. We don't want to touch any of that old stuff. But every time we go that direction, the universe feels less lived in. Oh, yeah. Because, and again, this goes to the thing we were talking about last week, which is like these writers who also pitch stuff that is like, this is my interpretation of the character. It's a whole new world. Doesn't matter what they were just doing, or like the fact that this guy literally just took a trip out of hell in my run. It's a whole other thing, and I'm doing it my own way. But sure, I love that for you. You're a great artist with your own stamp on things, but you're playing in a shared sandbox.
Yep.
And you're saying, I'm going to knock down all the castles and take all the toys and build my own thing, which is a little bit self-aggrandizing. But again, also, publisher, you paid for somebody else to lay that groundwork. You should use it. It really is, for the most part, it's like 75% evergreen content. Even if it's from the 60s, there are cool ways to use it. For as gross and weird as Professor Xavier having any kind of feelings for Jean Grey was, I did respect and still continue to respect that it got brought up during Onslaught as like a really not good thing, by the way. I mean, I think,
oh yeah, probably, it was gross.
Yeah. I think probably like even now we would have made it even worse. Oh, yeah. To the point where probably now we just wouldn't do it. But I still respected that somebody was like, no, that got said. I will be talking about it.
I swear they would have made it that like the part of him that was attracted to Jean was the start of Onslaught. It was a bad man inside his head.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really great that you're bringing all that up because it's going to lead us somewhere in a minute. So I love where this is already starting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something I'm so passionate about. Is just like, these universes are huge. You really might as well use it.
1,000%.
And honestly, I do feel like there's this degree to which it can and should take creative load off of writers, to rather than working up a lot of like new stuff to pump into the universe, use this enormous archive and put your creativity towards rethinking how to use the tools rather than building whole new ones that are really kind of just for you.
That's so much of what we've been talking about this year, said so cleanly and so precisely, because we've been talking about the idea that every writer says, this is the way I'm going to tackle this thing that's never been tackled. And I mean, it often has been, you know, just to point to that guy that wrote Buffy, when he started writing Astonishing X-Men, he was like, oh, I'm going to do something that had never been done before. The mutant cure. No, that had never been done before. When that guy that wrote Sandman was like, I'm going to be the first person to personify entities. Certainly not. And that's sort of that thing. And I'm just kind of purposely hitting that with that language, because the other part that gets really complicated to talk about is, so when this show all began, it was me and some friends at the time covering different elements of classic X-Men. And then Krakoa happened, and we were so taken by what was happening that we couldn't look away. And so we got super attached to Krakoa, and we started doing a split focus, something classic and something Krakoa every month. And that was a great time because the person that had been covering Champions and Defenders with me had decided, you know, he was done covering comics like that. We kind of ran out of some convenient stuff to have guests on. And so it was a great break. And it gave us this opportunity to start talking about Krakoa. And then when Hoxpox ended and the X-Men XF line started, which is because that first 6 books in order spelled X-Men XF. It was X-Men, Marauders, Excalibur, New Mutants, X-Force, Fallen Angels in order. And that was the order they came out in. So it always spelled X-Men every month. It was crazy. When that started, we said, you know what, it's actually getting harder to cover the old stuff too. Let's drop it. And part of what that gave us an opportunity to do was stop apologizing for a lot of creators. You know, I made pithy comments just before about, you know, barely even pithy. Let's just be honest. It was basically a pith helmet, about like, you know, that guy that wrote Astonishing, that guy that wrote Sandman, because death of the author is kind of necessary when you're talking about older comics. And so it became easy just to talk about newer comics, and newer comics were inspiring. They were exciting. It was people doing exactly what you're saying, taking that sandbox and exploring. Instead of telling us that there was this new amazing fire-starting mutant that we had never heard of, we got that other Pyro that was fun to deal with for a while. Instead of telling us that there was a whole new generation of kids that had to take precedence, characters like Annalee got a chance to shine next to characters like Danny Moonstar, next to characters like Chamber. And so there was room for generational ability. One of the things that I was really grateful when we jumped to this future era was we got to kind of leave behind the trappings of no queer people. We got to leave behind the trappings of a lot of problems. But I think we wound up in a new problem, which is when you raise that bar, right? Like, there was a program on in the early 90s on HBO called Real Sex, and Real Sex was a documentary that allowed people to talk about things that maybe didn't get talked about as comfortably. But because that raised the bar for what was available, everything followed suit. And you saw this exponential inappropriateness follow suit of a documentary style idea. So you can sort of see where somebody takes something creative and cool and just kind of makes it pornography. You kind of lose that element. That's kind of what happened with Krakoa in a lot of ways for me. It started as exactly what you're saying. Visionaries taking a big look back at the history of X-Men, where it's been and where it's going, and fusing elements of the Marvel Universe throughout, taking things we had learned from the DC Universe and making the best product we could. And then we hit the point of, but now you've done, now you've done Full Frontal. Where do you go from here? Now you've done Lars von Trier's entire filmography. What do we add to this conversation now? And I feel like Krakoa suffered from too big, too extreme, too much, too fast. And that's where people lost the ability to do what you're saying. They stopped bringing in these bigger ideas from around the universe. And suddenly, Krakoa was this thing that everybody wanted to write into. And everybody had their vision of how to make their mark on Krakoa by that second generation of titles, by the point that X of Swords was over, or 10 of Swords, or Stole My Money of Swords. By the time that was over, the heartache was there. So...
yeah, and I feel like, it got tough because one of the other greats, Kieran Gillen, came in, and Gillen is somebody who will also do that work of really pulling from the fully formed universe. But, Gillen might be really the sort of the wire on which this whole thing rests, because Gillen also... I say this with love, but writing Egomaniac really thinks that his stuff is the most important, and probably was encouraged to feel that way by editors. I don't think I don't imagine that like he came into those offices and started blackmailing people to let him do his stories and steamrolled everybody. I think probably a bunch of editors and publishers and people who like him, and maybe Akira Yoshida himself, said, "You are so great, just go do your Kieran Gillen thing.
Great,
you have heart."
us.
Yeah, just but it's pretty great when you've been on the books for long enough that you can reference yourself, and it's an old reference, which is cool in the case of his Sinister. He made a lot of the dandy, evil, gay Sinister that sort of was the only way that character could go after being the 90s X-Treme, also like thinks it's cool to work with Nazis, and then we can never laugh with this villain character. He did all that, and it was really cool. I loved that run in San Francisco and the stuff with Sinister, and the idea of Sinister as a system. So much great stuff. And then a decade plus later, he comes back and gets to write Immortal X-Men and start to do new stuff with Sinister. Really cool, but that's his fascination. And so the Quiet Council, which was this fascinating mix of X-Men heroes, X-Men villains, X-Men team members, X-Men mentors, all of whom wanted to make moves. Some of those were completely self-interested. Some of those were entirely altruistic. Some of those I would agree with as altruistic motives and would say, like, let's go in that direction. Others I would say you have the completely wrong idea with how to do good in this world. So fascinating watching all those people interact. And it went from that to just being about Mr. Sinister, and then into Sins of Sinister. And then, and then the whole thing sort of fell apart. Not because of that, because clearly the line had its plans well before that, but that's how we experienced it as readers. You then had something like Steve Orlando's Marauders, which, I thought was a great book. But I do think, and literally took them off of the island into space, all the way back in time to 1 billion years ago. And so was very much Steve Orlando's personal vision for how he wanted this team to be. What's great about that is it's one team, it's a few characters, and he actually did connect it to a bunch of cool X-Men lore stuff. But again, you just could kind of see a little bit less writing in harmony. I can write Kitty passing through the Green Lagoon, having a couple drinks in my book, and then somebody else can write Kitty, stopping at the Boneyard just to say hi to Lorna because they're friends, and then they can all go their separate ways. We saw a lot of that on Krakoa, and it was what was really fun. And it became a lot more people being like, well, no, Kitty can't be there because she's in space, so nobody can ever touch her. And here's my thoughts on, everything that's happening with her, and none for Gretchen Wieners. Bye. Percy's kind of doing the same thing in his X-Men CIA, and that just sort of starts to snowball and get worse. Spurrier, I think, is being one of the kind of more generous ones, because he's keeping everybody on the island and trying to just expand lore and continuity. But again, nobody really wants to necessarily play with that then. Both it takes two to tango. Everybody else has got to want to play too. So it did just sort of, we went from the mythological X-Slack that everybody talked about when Krakoa started, which was Hickman, Vita Ayala, Leah Williams, Teenie Howard, and they just talk
how many not men you just named.
Yeah, exactly.
What we wound up with.
Right. And everybody talked about just how great and collaborative it was. And I'm not necessarily saying that went away even afterwards. They might have kept that same slack with all of the, with Steve Fox, Steve Orlando, Jerry Duggan, who was on the original X-Slack as well and was mentioned as being great. Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing. These are all fantastic people. They just had so much concern of their own thing. And it felt, rather than this like cohesive land, it did feel like an archipelago that was just, the islands were slowly drifting apart. And it was tough.
Slowly drifting apart. It was like watching something you love die slowly. Yeah. Because for me, the disharmony was at 10 of Swords.
I know. You've always said that, and I really appreciate that you feel that way.
It felt like a big misrepresentation of the facts. It felt like a big lie. It felt like first of all, that there were so many swords in that original image, and that they made it seem, I guess I'm calling out the engine for a minute, right? The way all of this works is a social contract between us and the creators. And the engine was such that they gave us hints and let us run. Why is Xavier in the helmet? His and Magneto's relationship is sus in a sexy way. Scott, Logan, and Jean, are they? And like, they did so much. It's on you to run the ball for us. And then we did what they asked us to do again. We ran that ball on 10 of Swords. And I'm not saying like, listen to the show, I can prove it. But no, I can tell you that there were 14 people in a room. 14 fans that represented X-Twitter at the time, and not all of it, but a legitimate, diverse arrangement of many genders, not just two genders. We had non-binary contributors. We had trans contributors. We had contributors who represented a beautiful spectrum of the racial and cultural makeup of X-Men readership. And a lot of us felt that we were being told the same thing. And I only say that it's so many different walks of life because too often people are like, well, maybe that's just your little, bald white world. And I'm like, well, number one, I'm Latin, so fuck you for thinking I'm not brown enough. Thank you. Number two, I'm bald because it's beautiful. But I also, I'm not losing sleep over any of that. But the point I do want to drive home to is they let us think it was going to be one thing, and then they delivered it. And when they delivered it, they were like, oh, we never said it was that. We never said that it was one challenge per issue and that it was 10 challenges and that the challenges were so we never said that. Okay, I guess you didn't, but you sure released a lot of art and you sure hinted and you let people say things in tones that made it sound like, and you knew what you were doing. You knew the choices you were making and how you were making your audience think things were going. And to find out that was the point at which Hickman had already quit. Like, there's no mistaking it. Hickman had already left the books at that point. And we were running that ball to the end of the field, I guess. But he wasn't going to make it through the rest of the game. And switching in Kieran Gillen, who writes beautiful stories about specific structures versus, because the other thing we're leaving out in all of this, Krakoa ended about a year ago, but John Hickman left Krakoa like 3 years ago, and the thing he did immediately following Krakoa was the biggest clunk of his Marvel career. I don't think anything fell down the stairs harder than Gods, and on every stare down the way, it got a splinter in its eye or its nipple. Like, there was uncomfortable pain bleeding, and it never recovered.
Which I gotta say is the biggest disparate. There's nothing I care about more than X-Men. So Jonathan Hickman writing X-Men was the greatest news I had ever heard. But Jonathan Hickman visiting the fundamental forces of the Marvel Universe, pretty close second. There's not, after the X-Men, there's not a lot else I care about besides then the abstract entities, how everything works. Like, I'm constantly, my Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny, Pepe Sylvia pinboard, conspiracy pinboard, is the abstract entities, Nightmare, how various Sorcerer Supreme work, the one above all, the one below all, like figuring out how to make the cosmology work, even if it is for a flat, just because it's fun, not because it should work, but because they have introduced all these concepts. And again, like, you paid for it. Somebody invented all this stuff decades ago, and you paid them for that work. It is established canon. Why not have some fun asking real questions about, like, oh, what can we say about how these forces work, how they all work together? What is a big message that we could put here, and then how do we put a really interesting, humanizing, relatable story? I was excited for that idea. I was even okay with, like, because again, why did we need Win red coat buddy dude and a hot vaguely Asian wife, but everything is white on her? Questionable choices, friends. I didn't necessarily need 2 new characters. I definitely didn't. There were like 5 others, but whatever. Sure, I even was willing to accept them because I'm like, maybe we get a Sentry out of this.
Yeah.
I was excited for, again, all of this work on the abstract entities and everything. And what's so funny is they're technically all in there, but it's just so sort of like little pieces here and there. You don't really get a lot. There's a lot of Oblivion's a big one. The In-Betweener's a big one, but a lot of other people barely, Eternity, Infinity really don't get that much screen time. And then very recently, in both Storm and Jean Grey, we got all of the abstract entities in their banging fashion as fuck looks that were created for gods, and it's exactly what I was looking for. All the abstract entities showing up looking like people to dog on the Phoenix Force is like, that's exactly what I was looking for. Not at all what gods was. 3+ years too late for it to happen, and like, done with no fanfare, where I think it's sort of like the biggest thing ever. Like, I think that should be, that's bigger than One World Under Doom to me by leaps and bounds. The idea of all of the abstract entities showing up to talk to the Phoenix Force, that is so much bigger to me than One World Under Doom, and in and of itself is a better pitch than One World Under Doom.
And it's really funny because it winds up becoming Phoenix versus Sinister and Krakoa, which it's not in the beginning. Like, Phoenix is a thing, but she's not. And so I wind up feeling kind of funny about kind of like the nature of these big cosmic forces fighting each other and the scale they're fighting each other on. For those of you who can't watch because you're not me, TK did a chef's kiss at one point, and I was thinking to myself, like, yes, the abstract entities appearing in Phoenix and Storm is like Tyler Florence chef's kiss, but like the way gods happened was kind of like Swedish chef's kiss, and like, it's a good time and everybody's wacky, but like, I didn't get a story. And like, I know that Ryan North did a follow-up with One World Under Doom. Great that you brought up One World Under Doom. I'm going to be mentioning One Nation Under Doom later, but we'll get there.
Is that a thing?
Yes. It's the 2099 story that this is based on, which was going to get a video game and never did, because the 2099 story is a reference to a Marvel graphic novel from 1988. The whole thing, like Doom taking over the world, is something Marvel seems to go to when they don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So, but that's even part of why I don't think the MCU did it in the same slapdash way. I think the MCU did it on purpose because it's the same way people felt like, I know I definitely love the Infinity stories because I played Marvel vs. Capcom. No, I don't love everything I've enjoyed reading the Wikipedia of, and that is for sure.
Well, and the MCU has a luxury that comics just don't have at this point, which is I actually am perfectly happy to see Doom takes over the world in the MCU because I have not seen it 100 times. I was not excited when they did the Infinity Stone storyline that was coming out in the comics around the time of the Infinity Saga in the MCU, even though I love the Infinity Saga in the MCU, because I had read the original Infinity Saga. I have seen plenty of Thanos in the comics, so it wasn't exciting for me for them to do that concept over again. No matter if you make Gamora the villain, technically, what you're really trying to do is go, oh no, we have it again. I was not excited for Civil War 2, even though I love Civil War and I love Civil War being done in the MCU, because I have now seen plenty. And like, honestly, Civil War, totally fun, really great. But has everybody ever fought before? Fucking yes, they have. Many a goddamn time. So like, even though we named it for once, Civil War 2 was actually like Civil War 5 when it comes to everybody in the Marvel universe arguing. And frankly, gang war is just Civil War, like guerrilla warfare. Like it's very common for them to do that. So that's why it's not exciting to me to read in the comics. But most of these stories, I am perfectly happy to see adapted to the screen because that has never been done before.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that I'm not willing to see a repeat of a story, because I am a firm believer in like, there's really only 32 stories. You're seeing them all over and over again. And if you're an avid reader, you're an avid consumer of media, you have seen them all by the time you're 16. So I don't mind repeats. It's all a repeat. But I do mind the same company, same medium, same characters, same thing, same time. And it's the 4th or 5th time and I've bought it before. That's on top of like literally physically buying the same issues multiple times. No, man, I'm not gonna do it. And that is really why, like, I don't know how I feel about how these last few Avengers movies are going to go, but I'm not unsold on them. My mind is perfectly open. I'm completely ready to be entertained. The stuff that people have said is the worst about the MCU in the last few phases has been the stuff I've loved the most. And so this, like, people having their doubts about this, the more that happens, the more I'm like, I'm probably gonna love this movie. Even though there's a lot about it that I think is weird, whatever, I still don't care. I love the concept. That said, One World Under Doom, no, because I have seen that before. And again, the concept, the other thing I always argue is it's just not exciting after Secret Wars, the summer blockbuster comics event.
You know, and it's really interesting because this kind of ties together a lot of stuff that we've been talking about. But I know that you either started it or maybe someone you know is watching Star Trek Prodigy. And Kevin and I finally finished.
Sunshine Jake is watching it. I will get into it for sure, but I have not yet.
I highly recommend it because it really is a fusion of the storylines of Voyager, Picard, and Discovery.
Yeah.
And it makes references to the Cerritos, which is the ship from Lower Decks. It actually goes out of its way to tie 3 shows together chronologically. Like, it literally references events on other shows by showing them here. And Discovery was a children's show that operated at 24 minutes an episode. So there's altogether 40 episodes. There's really 20 if it's Star Trek. And it had a very specific goal in mind, give Voyager fans some closure while helping tie together the things that were happening on Lower Decks, Picard, Discovery. That's 3 shows that are literally different time periods. And it had this terrible responsibility, but it kind of did it by the end. I would probably not say that unless you're a big Star Trek fan or particularly a big Voyager fan, it's really the thing for you. But it did a really great job telling me stories I'd already seen or heard or read or seen the actor say at a Trek convention, this is what we would have done. And so I'd seen most of it, but I was rewarded. I felt excited. The female lead on it is Jackie from Yellow Jackets. So automatically, fuck. My favorite character, Jankompog, is played by Jason Matazukas, which I'm Greek, and so I'm going to love him for the rest of my life. Jankompog! And like it's a thing. I can't not love him. But it's the best Janeway has been treated in decades. And like, even though it was stuff I'd already seen, I found so many positive things to say about it. And I felt so good about that. And I want to ask you personally, because like, I am going to spend the money and I'm going to pick up the I forget what store at the mall has a special edition of Imogen Heap's re-release of Speak for Yourself, but like I will literally buy the same music done slightly differently. I will literally buy the DC version of something where it's just a matter of time before they do literally another reset and redo Hush. And he'll probably be part of the Court of Owls when they redo it in DC's newest 52. Is it a big deal for you when Marvel retells it without the trappings of 20th anniversary or new universe? Because it is for me. If you say 20th anniversary, I'll buy it. If you say new universe, I'll buy it. But when you say, I mean, they've kind of done this before, but they're different enough people that they don't remember it really exactly the same. It bugs me.
Anniversary comics, it really depends on if I have them already. It's sort of, I mean, like it is the same, I think, all around. So like there are a few artists that I will buy it no matter what. Tori Amos, you and I both just buy everything. Something we talked about the other day, and especially in regards to Speak for Yourself, is I am mostly deaf and spent most of my life not having access to stereo sound. And later I was introduced to bone conduction technology and was able to hear stuff in stereo, and so had a different experience. But most remasters are a little bit lost on me because one, I probably can't hear the difference anyway. But also my experience of listening to stuff is so different. That it just sort of it's sort of apples and oranges to compare. But for your Tories, I will pretty much buy anything, and I've bought multiple reworks, remaster. I have multiple editions of various albums or songs in my collection, as you do too. For something like Speak for Yourself, I did purchase that album when it came out. It was a huge album for me, but I didn't purchase the vinyl. Because I got into vinyl collecting later, and so that's really worth it for me. And so it's like similar with comics. There's a lot of stuff where it's like, I had purchased basically every issue of Generation X for the first probably 5 years, something like that. And I have bought a bunch of the Epic collection, but I hate the Epic collections. And if they printed an omnibus, I would buy it probably. Realistically, I would buy it for the display because Generation X is the most important kids in school X-Men comic in the world to me. So I would buy that over again. You would be hard pressed to make me buy a Wolverine anniversary. New Universe is a slightly different thing. That'll then also depend, because like, what are we doing here? If it's something like Ultimates, I can sometimes get into it. If it's sort of, if it's something more like The End, it's questionable. But then we have the big problem of like, is this just Marvel reheating their nachos in 616? And the only thing lately that will inspire me to buy those is if we're going to talk about them on the show. And again, it's the thing that we've said with Amalgam. Like, I'm not telling you guys to go buy that Amalgam omnibus, and I'm not telling you guys to read Amalgam. You know, I'm kind of saying don't.
Oh, yes.
But I have had the best time doing it because I love doing the show and I love talking about comics with Nico, and like I love what we do. And that's come up a lot lately with comics, is like, you know, One World Under Doom being a great example. We've seen this 1,000 times before. I don't really want to buy it, and we haven't been buying a lot of it, but the joy I get from any purchase and any coverage of One World Under Doom is the fact that we do this show. It has nothing to do with how the book is. It has to do with the work that we do to respond to the book. But yeah, I mean, I'm really over it with stuff that I have seen. I mean, you know, like I said, I started reading in 92, 93. So I'm in my 4th decade of seeing some of this stuff. And it really is, some of it really is, you were seeing it in 1993 and it's the same thing again now. So like, nah, can't do it.
When I got married, my best man's speech at my wedding was, I'm going into my 3rd decade of friendship with this person. There's literally no surprises left. So I'm relieved that he's getting married. I think that's your relationship here with Marvel. And, you know, I'm kind of relieved that they're getting a little married to DC. I hate to think of it that way, but this is 4 crossovers in 2 years. And I am feeling like we've seen DC retell Court of Owls in a matter of speaking. And that you know, that's from the Snyder run. That's New 52 original. Though Owlman certainly isn't. You know, we see Civil War 1, Civil War 2. We see retellings of Infinity stories. We see I guess we're calling ourselves the New Mutants again. We see these sorts of reiterations of these identities, and that's where I'm excited to see what we can do. You know, I don't necessarily... First of all, I am buying that Parallax figure. Oh my god. I don't know that there's ever been a better Hal Jordan figure in this world than Lantern Volume 3 49's cover. I'm so excited about that figure from McFarlane Toys. But I don't really need another Hal Jordan Parallax story. I love that I got one that was vaguely like Rocket Raccoon was like, man, people and stones on their fingers, right? Like, I loved that, and the fact that we're still referencing that 2-page story that much when the Zdarsky Captain America Wonder Woman was so good it could have anchored its own book, and we're still talking about the 2-page story. No offense, I'm not talking about the Crypto Jeff story. It was cute, but it didn't hit me the way the Rocket Hal story did. So I feel like I am excited to see the Marvel and DC harmony that can come, because, like, you know, when Jim Lee said why they're not worried that people are also going to be doing Superman stories now that he's going to be I forget what it's called when it's a legal comic book, but I'm just going to call it open source, now that he's going to be public domain. You know, but they don't know how to tell a Superman story. What he's really leaving out is they don't have access to 99% of Superman stuff because it came the fuck later. They basically have what Gonzo had in Muppet Babies. He is from Crouton in the Salad Galaxy, and they are just doing their best if they don't have the real deal. But by taking the real deal and putting him in unique new places, I'm really excited. But you know, it's exactly what we're talking about. I thought that altogether, when it's all said and done, the 23 or 24 episodes of this Marvel vs. DC project, they were going to be life-changing. I thought this was going to, because, like, we haven't done a bad one yet. You know what I mean? Like, we did MC2, and that literally changed us as men, right? We were like, no, this is an entire universe around a woman, and we were wrong that we thought that women were as good as men. They're better. And, like, so, like, we learned. And then, like, Spider-Verse was literally, what if the cultural cachet of Spider-Man was irrelevant? and it was personal cultural cachet that was important, and everyone got to do their own Spider-Man, and it was an entire world of Spider-Men, all made by different people being unique and themselves, and not necessarily contributing exactly their spider, exactly who they were growing up, contributing the one they always wanted to see. Like, we did not have a miss, and then this, you know, it maybe felt a little bit like a miss. And I don't know how much of that was, you know, what we've already talked about, the loss of Krakoa, the sort of unfocus of the two universes in many ways, all of this attention put on Ultimate and Absolute. But I feel like this was the first time I had a good time, despite feeling maybe like I wasn't reading good books. Everything else just was like, I had a good time reading good books.
Yeah.
This was like, some of these were just actual cash grabs. We've already talked about most of them. We are in what I would say is like the golden age. We've got some really great stuff coming up. Ultimate Access is crazy. Silver Surfer Superman, Incredible Hulk Superman, Superman Fantastic Four, Batman Spider-Man, Batman Captain America, the 2 Daredevil Batmen, and JLA Avengers. We've got good stuff coming up. Literally, good books next. But you know, we really had to shovel the shit with a golden shovel in the return to get anywhere good here.
And you know what's interesting is like we remembered this and chose this and decided to do this project and linked it to our history and had something basically to get out of our system. We were working something out with this. And so there's a real love and fun in that. And that's where, you know, when you talk about having fun, even though the books aren't good, that's been such a huge part of this project. And contrasting that to the struggle that we have had with current books, where again, like, I think no matter what, please take it as read that we just love doing this show. And so I like, no matter what, on its worst day, covering the worst books, we're still happy to be doing. We would literally just skip a week if it was so bad we weren't happy to be doing the show. I think if either of us was generally like, I'm specifically not happy to be doing this, it would be a very different conversation. So please take this read that no matter what, we are happy and we love what we do and we love doing this. That said, I think we're about as unhappy as we could be dealing with current comics, not in large part because there's just no in for us to share with you the joy we feel about the medium, the characters, the creators, the memories that we have. You know, that's one of the toughest things is like, when Amalgam was at its worst, we could still sort of talk about like, oh, this is what I thought it was going to be. This is what I remember. This is what we had. This is what the 90s were like. With current books, it's like, oh, this is all not written very well, and Trump is still president. Like, we have no good memories. There's no good status quo to be talking about. Like, nothing is reflective of an era of joy. And you know, that's the thing. Like, it's been years since Krakoa, and for Nico, the problem started with X of Swords, and I don't think your critique is invalid, but didn't start for me there. Started for me with 10 Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine. And even that in and of itself was like, fine, whatever, I don't really care. But it was running Moira off the island and then Moira killing and skinning Sean Cassidy and wearing his skin back onto the island. That's where it all really went downhill. But then even from there, like, I distinctly remember how frustrated we all were on this show that was happening. But there were other books that we all liked. And there was, you know, the era was that bothered me, but the era itself was not bad. And when Kieran Gillen took over, I didn't think that was a bad thing at all. And I still don't think it's a bad thing. I just think the lock in on Sinister wouldn't have even itself been a bad thing, except for we went right from that to we just basically went off a cliff. Like, it was right from that into fall of the House of X, and then the whole thing was over so fast. Since the Sinister, it could have been really cool if Krakoa had then kept going for another few years, where things normalized for a little bit. And again, the Quiet Council was that crazy disparate group of people that I was mentioning to you.
Stop making it better. Stop making me like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really like, there were things, but again, like, when the books came back after 10 Lives and X Deaths, I was excited to have Marauders back, but again, that didn't end up being one that I super vibed with. But I loved like what was going on with Spurrier. There was a lot of great Unlimited comics at the time. There was plenty of stuff that I really did like. And so like it has even been possible for us in times of like frustration and anger to still have kind of to find joy. And there's been other great books coming out at the time. There's been what felt like at the time, and so it was easy to read it and be like, oh, this is great, a cohesive publishing plan and ideas for characters that sort of could transcend 20 minutes of publishing, or the idea that a character is not going to sort of sell great after the 5th issue. Maybe I was very naive. Maybe there was no plan at the time and it just felt like there was one. But now everything just really feels so disparate and disconnected. It feels like it's so difficult to lift anything off the ground, to connect anything. I'm thinking about stuff that I fell in love with because I started doing this show, and like I think about Ghost Rider and Daredevil as two of the really big ones. Ghost Rider has a book coming up, and the ghost writing has sort of had an expansion a little bit, but like,
yeah,
which is cool. But then Ghost Rider has not, like, the entire horror line has not really driven forward with some of the creative ideas that have happened with Ghost Rider. We had one of the greatest runs in Daredevil history. And so we even had what could have been a really fantastic water tread while we, get Charlie Cox in the MCU seat, figure out what everything's looking like, find that person that is so passionate about the future of Daredevil. We had a run that went absolutely a minimum a year too long. There's nothing announced. We're definitely, we've got the show, so that's exciting, but the real gut punch of no Daredevil announcement at NYCC, and that meaning that it very well could be March. I mean, March at the early, because there's a con that they do. Last year they had a bunch of big X announcements there, maybe 2 years ago.
They could have peppered them in surprise, like sometimes
yeah,
like C2E2.
Yeah, thank you. C2E2 is a big one thing, or Emerald,
like D23 sometimes,
or South by Southwest.
Oh my God, right? Like you expect to see a Beyonce set, or you expect to see somebody be like, "Stop believing in Theranos" at South by Southwest, but instead they're like, "Here are your X-Men.
Here's the X books." So we might get one of those for Daredevil, but if not, we might be looking at SDCC. Like, we might be looking at NYCC 2026. I don't know. Who knows? As I don't know, man. It's such a weird time to be in this. But my love and my joy does not diminish for the medium as a whole, for the characters, for the stories, for, again, this enormous universe that you guys paid for. And I paid for it too. I bought them. So I'm going to keep doing my thing and digging into the archives, because that's, like I said, I paid for it. I bought it. You sold it to me and I bought it. So that's what we're doing.
And it's to that end that we're taking a big breath. We're taking a big step back, and we're saying there are so many beautiful stories out there. And we've been floating this at you guys for a hot minute, and you guys have seen it coming here and there. But We're finally doing it. We're taking a moment and we're taking a big breath. Now, we had said to you guys back in May that we were relaunching this show to be new content and classic crossovers and trying to interlink them. And that went well from about July through roughly September. But the truth is, the current state of comics is occasionally harder to map than a schedule would allow. So what we've decided to do as a team, myself and TK, and we've mentioned it to Kevo, our producer, and he totally thinks it's a great idea. Right around Batman Deadpool, which is going to be released November 19th. That's going to be our last regular episode of new content covering the books that drop. But that does not mean our new content is going to stop. Something that we've been hearing a lot from a lot of our fans, and especially seeing it in the download numbers, is you guys love classic material. And actually, the thing you guys seem to maybe love even more than us covering classic material is us covering classic AUs. And so we want to do what makes us happy and makes you guys happy. So we're going to be re-envisioning X's for Comics. Back to what a lot of you are asking for. The stories you love, the stories we love, and AUs in between. Of course, also stories we love and that you love, but not from the main Marvel universe. We're going to be rebooting this show to pick up with what was my actual childhood jumping on point, Uncanny X-Men 360 and X-Men 80. It's a two-parter known as Children of the Atom, which leads directly into Hunt for Xavier, the Magneto War, Magneto Rex, the Astonishing X-Men second volume, but first volume in the main continuity, which also features Apocalypse, X-Men The Shattering. From there, we're going to go into Apocalypse the 12, Ages of Apocalypse, Dreams End, Revolution, so many incredible stories across that breadth of material. And before you know it, we are finally on this show going to be covering things like New X-Men, the Casey Uncanny, X-Treme X-Men, and more. So for those of you who have always been saying, we can't wait to see you guys do Revolution, New X-Men, and then eventually get to the Reload, it's on the docket. Now, before we announce the other AUs, TK, this really is like my point of power in X-Men. My favorite point in all of X-Men is this era. My favorite point in Marvel as a whole is probably Secret Invasion, but my favorite, because he loves you, my favorite point in all of X-Men is this. And it was so exciting when you said to me that this was an era that you were interested in, because while you know some of it extremely well, I mean, like, biblically, right? Like, you could use a little more deep research on, like, 3 and 4 years before New X-Men. You could use, because, I mean, New X-Men. I know you do, but, like...
Yeah, no, but what we're starting with is basically exactly where I stop.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I guess it's where I stopped is a little bit before this, because I have very, very little experience with anything in here. I think really the only big thing that I have read from, I mean, I've like Marvel Unlimited issues here and there for whatever reason, or like, was looking up one character and pulled an issue. But what the only thing I have concentratedly sat down and read from this era is the 12. Because, it's important that you read the most important, least important Summers Gray story that has ever existed. The rest of it, completely in the dark about.
And that's where I felt really excited, because one of the things that I know is that right around the time that I began initially working in what we'll call, I guess, like, hourly travel jobs in my mid-20s, I began reading comics extensively on my then Kindle and then Kindle Fire or whatever I had at the time. I was reading on whatever baby boy tablet I had, and I had that. I had my physical copies because, of course, I have a very extensive collection as a result of my father's deciding when I was like 18 that he wanted nothing to do with all of the comics that were sitting in his basement. So they became my problem. And so problem, but also joy. And so I had so much, and I was carrying it around and reading it. And for many years, all of my comics were in a chronological read order. And you could just like go in and, oh, well, that issue of X-Force goes after that issue of X-Factor because that's the order in the box, which let me tell you, eventually one day when I was like, this is not how books work, and tried to put it back in order, I just gave up. Some of them are still sitting in a bucket, you know what I mean? But like, this era is one that if you ask me, I say, oh no, that's the best era. Oh, that's the one. I am so excited to put that to the test. I am so excited to see what I still love, what still works for me. I'll admit there are places that I'm getting a little anxious already, to really be real with you, because like, as we cover this, we're going to be looking at things like X-Treme X-Men, the entire Counter X line, the entire X-Men Revolution, which includes things like Black Sun Magic. That's Amanda Sefton. We're going to be talking about the end of X-Man when he's a shaman. I wonder if that tattoo ever had any impact on anyone. We're going to be talking about Maximum Security, which is literally the thing that Vuk, Jessica Chastain's character from Dark Phoenix, comes from. Her one appearance. Fuck. We're going to be talking about the 100-page X-Men 110 Christmas special. And that's just before we get to things like Search for Cyclops, Eve of Destruction, and more. From there, we're going to be moving into some of the most famous stories of the X-Men, but also some ones that get people kind of like scratching their head. We're going to talk about the entire Icons line. We're going to be talking about one of my favorites of all time, X-Statix, and then things that leave people kind of confused, like Soldier X, Agent X, and more. We'll be discussing Weapon X, the fact that I finally have an opportunity to talk about this Weapon X series after so many years and such an emotional attachment to this book. So exciting. We'll be talking about the terrible Emma Frost 18-issue series. Yes, it is terrible. I'm sorry. It is. Just accept it now, because I'm not going to be any kinder to it in 2026 when you hear me talk about it. We're going to talk about Runaways 1 through 18. Why? Because it's got a mutant and a dupe doll. Fucking deal with it. My name is Nico. How do you think that happened? So, I'm so excited about this, but I'm also a little trepidatious because we're also talking about X-Men, Avengers Disassembled in the middle of this. So, good luck.
Disassemble is actually one of the things that I picked up. I mean, like I got back into comics with New X-Men, and the issues that I read live were the last few issues of Planet X, and then Here Comes Tomorrow.
HCT!
And then soon after that is Disassembled. Which to me, to this day, I think still holds up. I really do.
I love that Marvel tried to claim for a hot minute that Planet X is X-Men Disassembled, and that like the stuff going on with Magneto is a result of Scarlet Witch, which is why there's all that weird stuff where that's not really Magneto, but maybe it is, and it's Zorn. They've worked so hard to make House of M not
What's
just
really
something that they came up with to pad out the fact that John Cassidy drew slow.
Yeah, what's really unfortunate is that, like, they have had years to actually write it. I don't even hate the idea, because, again, I get it. You can't have Magneto have done a Holocaust.
That's a little too real to the world right now.
True. I mean, like, yes, now we really absolutely desperately need that not to have happened. But at the time, I get it. Like, if we're ever going to have this guy being Cyclops' lieutenant on Utopia, he can't have been that guy that destroyed Manhattan. Also, like, but also you guys never acknowledge in any other book after Grant Morrison's New X-Men that he leveled Manhattan. Like, why was there not a damage control being printed at that time being like, this is how we got, you know?
It's like it's in New Mutants 13 and nowhere else.
It's, to me, what a loss, because like, imagine a whole Hell's Kitchen series where it's like, yeah, Magneto completely fucked us. But anyway, like they had so much time to write what any cool explanation rather than like having some editor say it on a panel. They could have done a short. There's so many things they could have done to show it. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, you know, even the retcon lore, I get that you got to do it. Write that book. That's a book that would sell pretty well.
The complete history of the DC universe is doing pretty hot.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's even that too. Like yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic series. It has been such a joy for me to read as somebody that's coming into the DC universe. And, you know, Marvel has done versions of that. Again, the thing that I say that Marvel is doing that DC is not is data pages. It's so weird to me that DC is really not doing much in the way of data pages right now. Because again, nobody invented, or as Nico pointed out, like they go back so much further than we all think, and like nobody really has a claim on them. DC has done versions of them in the past. Marvel has as well. But putting prose in your comics because it's so dense is not the worst thing anymore. And I love that DC is going basically full on prose with pictures for this history of the DC universe. I think Marvel should do the same, and DC should do data pages.
I love that, and I really feel like the two of them could continue to learn from each other, which is why we are not done covering DC.
Hell no.
We might be switching to every other episode is going to be a classic X-Men story from the era that we've been discussing. However, we are also going to be peppering in, like we said, AUs and news. Now, you guys are going to see those news episodes coming up a little bit less frequently, but they're always going to include something exciting that's going on in comics from Marvel, DC, and what we should be keeping our eyes on for the future. Maybe it'll be a significant finale and how that's going to play into the next crossover, or maybe it'll be something exciting going on in the silver screen. Whatever it is, we're going to be there covering it every step of the way. Those might just become a little bit less frequent because we find that we have more fun being positive, and the things to be so positive about, it's not that they're less often, but with comics becoming so big, there's many more things that are not aimed at us, and so we don't need to be giving the uninformed opinion that says why they're less exciting. All we need to focus on is that those things are great, and we should be talking about the things that we're meant to talk about. Which is why, like we said, news a little bit less often, but oh man, we are still going to be talking about our love of X-Men AUs. We have two specific ones. Now, I'll be honest, TK, I did think about saying we should cover the 5 Gen X Epic collections and then Counter X, because there's only going to be one more Gen X Epic collection. It's going to be Volume 6. It's going to be the Counter X stuff. Everybody should just get their money ready for 2026. They do one a year. But we're going to look at AoA through the Epic collections, which is exciting because I've read the Omnibus. I've read them as they came out, but this presentation is really something else. The whole first one is a prequel, like, to the point where I think it's a bad idea that the first one exists. It's Chronicles 1 and 2, X-Man -1, X-Man Annual 96, and then Tales of the Age of Apocalypse, the 2 one-shots that were released a year later. Neither one of them will help you understand the universe before it starts. Mm-hmm. That whole first volume, what a shit show of, honestly, secondary thought stories. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to talk about it because I've never thought about it as an introduction. I've thought about it as an introduction after a conclusion, but I wonder how it'll feel as deep-seeding a world for me. From there, of course, it's the whole event, except we are not going to discuss Blink 1 through 4 in the pages of Complete Age of Apocalypse, because we will be discussing Exiles as an element of our new X-Men era read. So we're going to save Exiles for there, and as such, we're going to save Blink in the same regard, because it is the book that kickstarts the title. I'm excited because you're one of the people that made me care more about Age of Apocalypse in general. And I feel like I'm going to get a lot more out of covering this with you than I would out of covering it with someone who doesn't understand why I think this series, this line, is loved more than it provides.
Yeah, I mean, I am somebody who falls on both sides of that equation, because I'm somebody who loves it more than it provides, but I'm somebody who absolutely is not willing to argue with that assertion because I can see it from the other side. But again, like, these are issues that I bought. I remember going to the comic shop every week for the issues of this. I remember Legion Quest before this. I remember the first time I saw X-Men. And so, this is very formative to me, but I think that your critique already bears out, but I'm excited to actually go through the books with you and really see that that's the case, but also just like share, where my enthusiasm comes from.
Well, and I'm excited to be wrong, because something I have found is not that I am like, some crazy rube man, but I have come to discover that I have certain hard, fast decisions where I have just committed to not liking someone or something. Like, if you were asking me if there was a character that I focused all of my hatred on in my teen years, it was Valerie on 90210. I hated her so much. She replaced Brenda. I just hated her to the end, and so much. But like, Tiffany Thiessen, how can you possibly hate her? I was 10 and obsessed with Shannon Doherty and couldn't understand. I mean, it's why to this day I will never watch an episode of Who's the Boss. That's why, because Alyssa Milano was mean to my precious No, but it's because it's a bad show. And so I'm really excited to learn all. I hope we get so much hate mail about that from big Tony Danza stanzas. But I'm really excited to learn that a lot of Nico's age 12 opinions are based on being 12, and it's time at 39 as a comics professional, as a member of a collection that is filled with people who may or may not have worked on the comics we talk about. I should stop being a weird little gremlin man about everything. So I'm really excited to learn what I never knew about AoA having read it, but I'm more excited to learn what I never knew about 2099 because I never read it. I think I've read altogether 25 issues of 2099 in my life. I had a lot of trading cards, I had a lot of opinions, and I've read a lot of wiki summaries. But I don't know that I have the authority to judge 2099 with the audacity that I've judged it with. So I'm really excited. It's that joke. She don't have the garage band, but she do have the audacity. So I'm really excited to get the garage band, right? Ms. Cracker, baby. I am excited to get the garage band on this because 2099, it literally inspired so many things. Steve Orlando would just be Steve Tampa Bay if it weren't for 2099. Where would Spider-Man 2099 be now?
Where would Beyond the Spider-Verse be without Spider-Man 2099?
I even mean, like, where would Spider-Man 2099 be if there wasn't, like, a strong fandom that was, like, bring him back? And then he came back before everything happened. He got these little drop-ins. But, like, exactly, where would Spider-Verse be without Spider-Man 2099?
Well, and, where would the comic Spider-Verse... I think the idea that, the thing that you talked about, which is, like, what's your Spider-Man... starts a lot. I mean, it starts with Miguel. It starts with the idea that there is a Latina Spider-Man, that there is somebody who's not Peter Parker. And, that's not Ben or Kane or just Peter's DNA remixed by the worst possible dubstep geneticist of all time, the Jackal. It's a completely different guy. And it starts with that one, but we get so many from there. And
I feel like without that identity to say, this is a different Spider-Man. Like, I try to explain to Kevo why Bucky becoming Captain America in the films / Sam becoming Captain America in the films for me is complicated when Rhodey did not ever become Iron Man in the films, but Rhodey was Iron Man in the 80s and Bucky was still worm food. So like, it's weird. And while I love Sam being Captain America, because it's important to have a strong black male representing the identity of Captain America, I love the identity of the Falcon, and I love that he's such a character that there is now another Falcon in the MCU, because that is such an important identity to have in the Marvel Universe. So I love the what we'll call pay grade upgrade for Sam Wilson, but I certainly don't believe that it is a quality upgrade for Sam Wilson. But, you know, Rhodey made that all possible. The same way Jon Stewart made it possible. And I'm not just trying to compare, you know, black characters from the 80s. I'm saying this country has a humongous problem with treating anybody that doesn't look like Steve Rogers with any respect. So the fact that we had the room for those characters in an era that was infinitely worse, fascinating. And I think in a lot of ways, we're missing some of the context for what makes now possible. I think 2099, ultimately, I'm going to come to find it gave us every writer who would go on to work at Vertigo. Or some of them were already working at Vertigo, but like X-Men 2099 takes a while to get there, but when it does, not only does it become X-Men 2099 and get 2 specials, we get X-Nation 2099. X-Nation 2099 runs 6 issues. The X-Men 2099 spinoff barely runs shorter than Hulk 2099 or Fantastic Four 2099 runs. And the X-Men 2099 spinoff runs barely shorter than the miniseries that ends the 2099 universe. There is so much to be understood about how 2099 was working toward what could have been a secondary universe. I do believe that 2099 in many ways was kind of a failure, you know, financially speaking, but there would have been no MC2, no Ultimate Universe, no any number of things after it. Of course, we owe a lot to New Universe and I guess Star Comics, because I don't want to hear that somebody feels that I'm leaving Planetary out. Fuck you, but fine. Planetary, Star Comics, go get your Care Bears or whatever. But end of the day, I am excited to learn what I don't know about 2099, because I feel like it's going to make me 2099% smarter.
Guess we'll find out.
You have nothing to come back to that with, because what a dumb number joke. Fine. The episode's over. The show's over. I'm kidding. But what is over is a period of kind of floundering and meandering. We've loved what we've done, and I'm proud of what we've done. But something I've noticed is the episodes that make me the happiest are the episodes where we're the most positive. So I'm really excited that we're moving back toward material that we're not just positive on, but effusive of at times. There are, of course, going to be your Sabretooth Mary Shelley overdrives, and there are going to be your Wolverine Punishers 1 through 5. But for every one of those we're going to be talking about Sentinel by Sean McKeever. We're going to be talking about Mystique by Brian K. Vaughan. We're going to be talking about the incredible ways that New X-Men elevated our comic book storytelling, and X-Treme X-Men Savage Land, a mini-series that goes between an arc because it was ultimately decided that Claremont wrote the book too fast, gave us the ability to tell stories like Astonishing X-Men and Astonishing X-Men Ghost Boxes at the same time, and how that affected how we see a line. I'm so excited to get into all of this, but more than anything, I'm excited to continue getting into this with you. We have had so many incredible contributors over the years, but really only 2 co-hosts. It's been you and Jonah. And Jonah, you know, was somebody who said, like, I love Nightcrawler. Oh, turns out I don't love all of comics. And said, this wasn't for me. And like episode 38, he was like, I'm good to appear every once in a while. And you've said, no matter what form this show takes, you love this medium. And it's so rewarding to get to work with somebody like Jonah, who loves the elements of the storytelling, and that's why he's here when he loves it. He'll probably jump in for Runaways. He'll probably jump in for X-Statix. But you are the most ride or die, down ass bitch. You are here with Swizz Beatz telling you how to be a rough rider. You are Eve. And this is what I want. So, I can touch. Please tell me how you're feeling about this reboot as we settle down to the end of this episode.
Yeah, one thing I will absolutely toot my own fucking horn about is that is the case. I am down. I will read an issue. I will read a stupid arc. I will read something I didn't. I really did not think the MC2 was good when I was a kid, and I had zero interest in revisiting as an adult. But he really wanted to do it, and that's all I really need. You know, somebody else being like, I'm into it is enough for me to be like, okay, I'll walk with you for a little while. Worst comes to worst, I step off. But, you know, 9 times out of 10, I can find stuff to get into. And yeah, I mean, this is a little more my specific wheelhouse. Even like, again, like, as I said, this is an era that I basically have not read. I certainly have not read every issue. I certainly have not read consecutively. I've not read like I read comics, but I know everything X-Men, and like a lot of this stuff, the content of the issues I will know because I've wikied everybody, I've Marvel fandomed everybody. So there's not going to be a ton here that I'm like, I had no idea, but you know, it's about so much more than that. And so, you know, I really am excited.
I've never been more excited about a reboot for this show because every other reboot for this show came out of necessity. This one came out of desire. This one came out of thinking that you and I could be doing something more exciting, doing something that brought us more joy. And it was the first time that I felt like it was something that would bring our audience more joy. It was the first time that I said, oh, wow, this is what the audience is saying. I have the pleasure of looking at our numbers. And when I look at them and I see what people are downloading, you guys want to see classic material. You guys want to see AUs. So that's what you guys are going to get. I cannot wait to dive into these eras because whether it's AoA, which I feel great about, whether it's, 2099, which I feel at a loss about, or it is, are you kidding? So TK and I are always messaging during the show, and he just really found quite a moment for me. Just a $200,000 piano I want at an Ann Arbor Costco. No big deal. But also, Ultimate Daredevil. Talk about us talking about stuff and it happening. You know, that is part of where this show has to change. Because the Ultimate Universe killed Matt Murdock right away. And like, you know, who's fucking Ultimate Daredevil? Do I care? I probably do, because I care about Matt Murdock and Daredevil separately. Look at my love for Elektra. She's Daredevil, but she's not Matt Murdock. Look at my love for Black Panther and his era as Daredevil, even though he's not Matt Murdock. But, like, the thing that I love the most is talking about this medium that is so powerful. And talking about it with someone that I think is so powerful, that I know is so capable, that I understand his perspective, that makes this easier and stronger. You know, no lady on The View can do it without Whoopi, you know? So, TK, I think what I'm trying to say is when I'm on the show, I feel like I'm working out with Whoopi. And it's great. Deep cut 30 Rock reference. I'm just going to go balls. Anyway, Mystic Pizza the Musical.
I was trying to see if I could in any way recreate the like Ukrainian Cossack. Yeah, there's the shrug, but then there's the feed me Whoopi when she says it in the other. It's like the Kazakhstanian, like, I just had nothing for that, but I should have just said feed me Whoopi because of course I totally knew the reference. But anyway. Balls.
Where can we find you? Me want food.
You can find me looking at adorable images of Jane Krakowski and Jinx Monsoon, two of the only people to play Mary Todd Lincoln in Cola Scola's Oh Mary, hugging each other recently, and I just thought that was very sweet. On various social media services at TK Accidental. And where can we find you, Nico?
You guys can find me freaking out that Jane Krakowski and her entire production of Oh Mary were asked to extend to a second run. Super cool, super amazing, so proud of her. I have been a big fan since she wanted me to buy her face bra. But if you're not a big Ally McBeal fan, that's fine. She's just single female lawyer. You guys can check me out at Nico Action, NICOACTION. Of course, the music is at Nico Action Music, NICOACTION MUSIC. The shows are at X's for Comics, X's for Show, X's for Podcast, HTML, and more. Do us a favor, like, comment, and subscribe on those. But the thing you guys really need to do is you guys need to check out the upcoming list of everything that's going to be in every episode. We're going to start posting over at cageclub.me/x/ so you guys can keep up with what you need to read in advance. We're going to get that up in the next couple of days so that you guys have weeks to get ready. And once you do us 3 favors. Number 1, please be brave. We love who you are inside. Number 2, please stay safe. Crazy world out there. But number 3, evolve daily. Who you were yesterday, that's Children of the Atom. Who you are today, that's Revolution. I almost said reload. That's Revolution. That's how it's pronounced now. Everybody knows. But who you are tomorrow, that's New X-Men. And that's what we can't wait to cover. So until then, just keep being awesome.